Barry, okay, you're last but not least the man from Australia.
Last but not least, indeed. Can you all hear me? It doesn't sound like it's
I can hear you, but I'm
excellent.
standing
Okay.
close.
I should have my poll. Do any of you know where Australia is? So but I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. Australia has sort of developed oh, by the way, before I start, thank you very much, Richard, for the opportunity, and Elizabeth as well. You've done great work. Thanks a lot. There's, the Australian movies and things have come out and they've developed a sort of Crocodile Dundee view of Australia, and it's not really like that. I mean, Australia's it's suburbia effectively. It's like the US at the end of the day. I mean, as with Canada, as Corey was saying with Canada, we consume so much US TV, and we like the same stuff. My wife watches, what is that thing, Housewives of New Jersey. I keep trying to find where all the gangsters are, the swarthy gangsters. Yeah. But I haven't found any yet. But that translates into sales, a similar taste when it comes to consumer products. So if you have a product and you're wondering about whether or not it's going to sell in the US, if it does sell in Australia, it more than likely will sell in the US. Key features of Australia are a population of about 25 million, which is the smallest amongst. Everyone's been rattling on about them enormous populations, but I'll rattle on about our enormous median wealth, which is in 2011 was 4 times that of the US. So if I would say that we've become a little bit poorer, so maybe it's about three times as much. So 3 times 25. So you're looking at an equivalent of about 75 million US citizens. So that's not so bad. One thing that Australia does have, and that has protected us through the global economic crisis that you guys suffered, is a fairly strong conservative banking sector. They don't really get up to nonsense. They try sometimes, but we've got a very good. We've got something called the ombudsman. So even if you have an issue or you have some kind of an issue with a bank or with an insurance company, and we've had this experience before, you get on the phone and you phone them and they actually do something about it, which is quite amazing. And so there's that whole attitude that runs through Australian culture as well, and that does protect people's investments to a large degree. I mean, there've been cases where the White Shoe Brigade have run off with retirees millions, but generally, if you're sticking with the main banks, they are pretty conservative and they're really well regulated. Unfortunately, as with Canada, our currency is suffering a little bit at the moment, so. It's a good time. It's a good time to spend in Australia. It really is. I mean, again, last time I came out to the States, which was 2 years ago, it was parity. Now it's about 75 US cents to the Australian dollar. So, although we're far away from the US, there's a lot of I guess there's a strong relationship between the two countries. I mean, there's no issue with language. There's been a friendship for many decades, and I've often thought of Australia almost as like the 51st state. I'm assuming there are 50 states in the US, so the 51st state, or almost a US protectorate. I think that's probably a better description. As well, with another thing with Australia, if you look at it as an economic environment, it's a sort of closed test market, and by that I mean it has a geographical boundary. So we don't have porous borders. Once you're running something within Australia, it pretty much stays within Australia. So if you're running a patent prosecution or trademark prosecution, or testing a product, it doesn't drift across borders. You've got a solid geographic boundary, and it's almost like a little. It's a great place to test products. And the IP system, our patents, trademarks, and registered design system, actually plays into that quite a bit, because you can actually expedite your applications quite easily in Australia. For those of you are obviously familiar with the US patent application system and the trademark system, sometimes those things can take a while. I mean, I know that I myself have worked with clients that have filed patent applications in the US, and they can take a long time to prosecute, and the prosecution processes can be quite strict. So we've got a patent system that has two streams effectively, and the one is your standard patent, which can, of course, it can be expedited relatively quickly, but that's the similar sort of protection that you're getting with your utility patent in the US. So it's your standard patent. But we've got another little beast I always like to talk about, and often to the exclusion of the others, is something called an innovation patent. And this is really good for things like consumer products, things that don't require a significant amount of inventiveness. It's the more marginal stuff. So if you have like a widget or something that you really think is going to sell well, you can get an innovation patent for it in Australia. You can file the application actually, and then within a month you'll get a granted innovation patent, but it won't be enforceable. So you'll have another. If you want to enforce it, you can request examination of the application at any time during its 8-year lifespan. And you can get that in a position to enforce relatively quickly. So the innovation patent is really useful for those sort of consumer products. But interestingly enough, if you've entered into Australia with a fairly substantial patent application, it might be an item of machinery, or it might be a pharmaceutical product, you can actually take a component. Bearing in mind, I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible, but it's not easy. So you can take a component of that standard application out, and you can actually file an innovation patent application based on that standard application for that particular component. And that component could be the subject of a license agreement. It could be the actual product that you're selling, or you're wanting to test in Australia, and so it's really and you can be in a position to enforce it within about 2 or 3 months. So it can be the subject of a license agreement separately from the main application, and your main application will just continue for its normal 20-year period, and the innovation patent can continue for its 8-year period. And it's very useful. I've done this before with a client where you've had a situation where you have an infringement while the application is pending. Now, in the US, it's a problem. If someone starts infringing your patent application while it's still pending, you're going to have difficulties. You're going to have to wait for it to be in a position to be enforced. You can't even send off a letter of demand. You've got to be really careful. In Australia, what you can do is, provided they're copying something that's within the patent specification that you filed originally, what you can do is you can actually craft an innovation patent that will cover that infringement. So you'll make sure that you're actually capturing that infringement. You file your innovation patent, request certification, and then you can enforce it. And all the same time, your main application is not affected by that action. I mean, that can have implications for your other, if you've got a family of patent applications. But it's just an example of the flexibility and ease with which you can use the Australian patent and trademark system. So I see the little flag is up there at the back. So I'll just quickly, just some of the things that are quite interesting in Australia. This is an art piece, and basically I wanted to talk a bit about manufacture, but I won't. But the trademarks system is quite similar from as far as requirements are concerned. We don't have a requirement that you need to show use. So you don't have to, at any point, you don't have to lodge a declaration of use. You'll get your registered trademark. But if you don't use it, your trademark can be subject to removal from the register through lack of non-use. And the way that's done is that the party that wants to remove the trademark simply files an application for non-use. You receive that, and you have to prove use at some point. So because it's very difficult to prove a negative, the authorities have done it like that. So if you don't use it, it becomes subject to revocation or removal from the register. And you can also expedite your trademark applications. You just simply file a declaration, a simple one, say for commercial reasons, and you'll get an examination report within about 2 or 3 months. And also we have an opposition proceeding that once the application is accepted, it stands open for a period of 2 months for open to opposition. And it's quite important if you are running a trademark application in Australia that you employ a watching service. You can employ a watching service to see what trademarks are becoming accepted. And if it's something that you think is going to be conflicting with an existing trademark or one trademark that you want to launch and you might have basis for opposing it, then you can oppose it. And I think that'll be about it for me. But please, if you've got any questions about Australia or just want to talk about the business environment, just give me a shout or send me an email. I'll be happy to talk with you. Okay.
Great, Barry. So